Hello and welcome to today's episode of Dream Business, Dream Life. Today I'm joined by Hayley Perkins. Hayley is a therapist, podcast host, and fierce advocate for breaking the chains of diet culture. Drawing from her own journey of healing a lifelong struggle with food and body image, she empowers others to break free, reclaim their self-worth, and embrace a life beyond the scales. Today we're going to be deep diving into all of this and so much more. Hello, Hayley. Great to have us with you.
Hi, Emma. Thanks for inviting me on.
My absolute pleasure. Right, we're going to do what I always do at the start of these, and we're going to go straight over to you. Set the scenes for us a little bit and talk us through your own personal journey.
Yeah, absolutely. So I guess like a lot of coaches and a lot of therapists, they end up doing what they're doing because of their own personal experience. So I am a therapist. I'm psychotherapy trained and I'm also clinical hypnosis trained. In fact, April this year, 21 years, I've run a private practice. So I got into the work that I do because of my own experiences. And whilst I run a traditional practice, my big passion is supporting women who struggle with their weight, disordered eating, eating disorders, because it's something that I've battled with and has plagued my life for as long as I can remember. I can track it back. My weight started to go on when I was 6 years old. My dad was like the fun parent. He was the one that played with us. He was the one that read us stories at night. So when he went abroad to work, I was very young, and I missed him terribly. But I'd already had like learned that food wasn't just about nutrition. My mum was 16 when she had my sister, so very, very young, my mum. And one of the things my mum did was use food for love. She really struggled to show us love conventionally. Dad very much filled that role. So by the time my dad went away, I already had some really strong links between food and love. And at that time, my mum ran a sweet shop. And so I would go to the sweet shop after school and I would steal the sweets and I would stick them in my rucksack. And I would go home, and at night, when I was really missing dad, I'd get my rucksack out, put all my teddies round, and I would eat the sweets. And so, food very much then was a source of comfort. And of course, when I look at photos between 6 and 8 years old, I gained quite a lot of weight. And obviously, being plump at school, I was never overtly bullied, but there was a lot of comments. In fact, my nickname at school was Bulldozer. My dad was a bricklayer, and even then, like he would reframe that and say, "Oh yeah, but bulldozers are really like useful on the building site, right?" But that stuff hurts.
Mm.
And when you look different, I mean, I grew up in the 70s, and not many children or adults were overweight then, so it was quite unusual. And also, my sister, who was 4 years older than me, was like a rake. I mean, that's part of my story. My sister was really fussy around food. So I learned quite early on, we're really clever as kids, aren't we? That if I ate up all my food, I would get praised from mum or being a good girl. And my sister would get told off, like, why are you not more like your sister? So for me, it was like a double win. So there was so many, when I look back, there were so many links to eating to please, eating for comfort, eating as a love substitute that started very, very young. I then went to secondary school, and because I was overweight, all my friends were getting boyfriends. Boys never looked at me, and that's really painful when you're a teenager, and it just reinforces that belief that you're not good enough. And that was a really common thread that has followed me all through my life. And then going into like adulthood, because my self-worth was so low, if men did show an interest in me, I was so grateful. If they asked for a second date, I would overlook whether they were right for me or not. I was just so grateful that they wanted to go out with me that I would put up with a lot. And so that kick-started 20 years of abusive relationships in one form or another. And but fast forward to 97, so I was 26. I'd gone into a relationship 6 years earlier, about a size 14, and I came out of that relationship a size 24. So I was 19 stone, just under 19 stone when I came out of that relationship. It was physically, emotionally very abusive. And I didn't know, I couldn't process what I was feeling emotionally. I certainly would never have told anybody unless you've been in that situation. You really don't, I look back now and I think, why did I put up with that? And even when I left Emma, even when I left, I escaped, that's another story. I still blamed myself. my head would still go to that place. If I wasn't fat, he wouldn't have treated me like that. So even at that point, I still blamed myself. And I went on that quest because my weight was the problem, right? So I then went on a 5 year quest to fix my weight. And at that point, I wouldn't have even gone into a slimming club. My next door neighbor was a Slimming World rep and she gave me the books. I didn't have the confidence to even, I was so ashamed of who I was because of what I'd been through, but also because of how I felt about my body that I kind of self-taught myself like the Slimming World way. And it took me 5 years, but I lost 8 stone because I did the typical lose three, feel better, put one on, lose, put one on, la la la. So anyway, I remember the day I pulled on my size 10. Don't know why I had this thing in my head about being a size 10, that okay number. And I remember pulling on my size 10 trousers, feeling great, as you do when you've lost weight, but that I wasn't ready for what was to follow. And interestingly, I went into therapy at my slimmest because all of a sudden, what started to happen was men started to find me attractive. And I wasn't ready for that. And not just that, friends, male friends started to ask me out. And so conscious mind loved it because that's all I'd ever wanted. I wanted to be adored and attractive and like all of that stuff. But my subconscious was not ready for that. And so that was when I started to, when I went into therapy, I started to understand that my weight, that 19 stone I was carrying was an armor. It was a protection. It meant that men didn't find me attractive, as crazy as that sounds. So my conscious mind desperately wanted a relationship. So I felt okay. It was all about the ego stuff and like my inner child. And if someone wanted to go out with me, that meant that I was lovable. But my subconscious wasn't having any of it. So it threw me into this real turmoil. And when I stopped eating, if you like, on dieting, I started to develop OCD. I started going out partying and I put myself into some really dangerous situations. I was drinking a lot. I got into raving, was taking class A drugs, was having one night stands. It's like my ego just went on this massive rampage. So it's taken a lot of years to start unraveling and unpicking a lot of that stuff. And alongside that as well, something I realized as well at the time I was employed, I worked in insurance. How boring. I loved my job actually, but I was in system development. So it meant that I sat with people, learned what their jobs did, and then when I automated it. So people were getting made redundant. And that was I'm such an empath. The job was so unaligned to who I was. And through therapy, I realized that my whole career had been about pleasing my parents, social conditioning. You know what it's like in the 70s, like as girls, you had to do typing. We did typing at school, right? I don't remember boys doing typing unless they
No, I
wanted to,
don't
but we
either. Funny enough. No, no.
we did typing. So there was so much that came out through therapy. I was very in that head that my weight was because I was lazy, greedy, and lacked willpower. That was my belief for so long. And that weight was the problem. Therefore, if I lost the weight, my life would be rosy. No, it wasn't, because there was so much more behind it for me. So I went on that whole, like, had some counseling, realized my career was like actually reinforcing a lot of my stuff. So I was lucky enough, I was facing redundancy. I didn't have children, sold my house, took redundancy and retrained. So I retrained as a counsellor, started my practice. But I still had a lot of dysfunction around food. So I would look at myself naked every morning to disgust myself. So I didn't eat. So it's that carrot and stick, isn't it? And I very much came from the stick, that constantly beating myself up. And also all of my romantic relationships throughout my 20s and 30s just followed a very similar pattern. There was so much anxious attachment in me that I would have these like year cycles, and my weight very much when I remember doing like this is an interesting thing. Anyone watching that struggles with their weight, plot your weight over the years, do a bit of a timeline of your weight, and then look at what's going on around those times. And there was points when my weight would go down, always when a relationship ended because I was so distressed. And what I noticed was if I got on the scales, because I was obsessed with the number going down, as a lot of people are, it kind of gives us a sense of okayness. It bolsters our self-worth. So I'd be traumatized because all my relationships ended because they were unfaithful. So there was a lot of trust stuff going on. So I wouldn't eat because I was so traumatized. I'd get on the scales and see the scales going down, and somehow that made me feel better. So when you start to look at programs and why we keep following similar patterns when it comes to our approach to losing weight, you can totally see how at times in life when we're feeling unhappy, traumatized, upset, whatever, to focus on our weight and weight loss, it kind of gives a false sense of happiness. And that was definitely for me. So there was always this dip when a relationship ended. Then I'd meet someone, and slowly the weight would start to go on again because my insecurities would get peaked again. Can I trust this person? And then the relationship would end. So I just had this, like, over a 7 year period, this like up and down with my weight. So relationships really played a big part in driving not only my weight, but how I felt about myself. So I knew there was more work to do. And I went on a TA 101 course, transactional analysis. A friend said, "Oh, I'm going on this course." And I thought, "Whoa, I'll come along." Oh my God, it was just, sometimes when you go on something and it absolutely makes sense. And this was where I started to like explore the inner child stuff. And I went on that course, and then the foundation year was starting the following week. It was meant to happen. So I signed up, and that's when I started my psychotherapy studies. And when you go, I kind of went along thinking, oh, I'm going to learn to work with people. You don't. You go in, you have to rip your own skin off. You have to really know yourself, because as therapists, to hold people through their own pain and discomfort, we have to be comfortable. We have to be able to do that. And so that was a huge step forward in me finally starting to really understand myself at a deeper level, and through understanding how the beliefs my inner child felt. I was so disconnected. We disconnect from that little girl when we're growing up, not because we've got bad parents or anything, because society tells us from day one of birth there's rules, isn't there, that we have to follow. And so we become very disconnected from ourselves. And I was very disconnected from myself. And that was where I used food as a source of comfort and lots of other things. And so that was a really big step forward for my personal journey, but also cementing that this is where I needed to work. I wanted to work with women and to give them an alternative to believing that their weight is the problem. And for some people, they've put a bit of weight on having their children or whatever, and they absolutely need to just look at diet, look at exercise, and that works for them. But for people who have struggled with their weight systemically from childhood, from teenage years, there's a lot more going on than just eat less and exercise. And also we carry a lot of trauma around dieting. I remember, even now, it's interesting. I was talking about this the other day. When I see photos of me when I'm slimmer, my automatic is to go, "Oh, look how slim I am there," in a good way. And actually, when I look behind my eyes, there's a photo of me. I'd not long met Gary, and we were at a wedding. It was that first year. And I remember that first year, I put myself through hell because of the trust stuff that I'd had in previous relationships. Gary also used to be married to a size 8 Russian model. If that's not going to play with your head when you've got body dysmorphia, not a lot else will. And so that first year, outwardly, I was being Mrs. Cool. I was cool with everything, but internally. And so I looked at this picture, and I remember the turmoil, the emotional turmoil that was going behind that slimmer body. Yes, I was slimmer because I was engaging in quite a lot of restrictive um, eating patterns. Um, so I feel incredibly grateful to get to do the work that I do. Giving women, I predominantly work with women. I do work with some men, but working with women to help them see a different way. My business is called If Diets Don't Work. My one-to-one program is called A Different Path, because that's what it's about. And I'm about to launch my passion project, which is called Beyond the Scales, which has been like the whole 21 years of my personal experience and professional experience all coming into one. One of the biggest things for me, because trust has been such a big part of my life, I don't ask for help. This is a real common one for women, isn't it? We spend our lives pleasing others. We also spend our lives being really strong and not asking for help. And if we do ask for help, it's often not delivered in the way we want it. It's all of that stuff, isn't it? We kind of create a bit of a trap for ourselves. I totally see that in myself. So the last couple of years for me on a personal development front, I've worked on simplifying life, but I've also I cut me open. I'm a people pleaser. I love giving, I love making people feel special and seen and heard and all of that stuff. But equally, I've not been in that equation. So the last couple of years, I've been like opening up to receive. Now, for someone who's got issues around trust, that's quite a thing. And I still can't quite put my finger on what I've done. It's been an energy shift rather than a conscious shift. And so beyond the scales has been a big step forward for me because I've brought a team together. So it's not just me. Obviously, I'm at the helm. I'm the one that's going to be doing a lot of the mindset work, the behavior work, all of the deep dive stuff. But I've brought a living nutritionist on board. I've got a beautiful lady that's going to work on movement. But it's from a very different aspect. My ideal client is somebody who it's not about food for them. They've got to that point. They know they want to lose weight. I'm not anti-weight loss, by the way. I feel much better when I'm slimmer. I've got a lot of arthritis, so when I carry extra weight, it's painful. And also, I love clothes, right? And
You
I
do.
like to have a good range of clothes. So, my it's an interesting one because weight loss, food and exercise are absolutely a part of that. But for people who have struggled most of their life, there's a little bit that needs to happen before we start to change diet, move more. Otherwise, there's just going to be this constant resistance going on. So, Beyond the Scales is absolutely about teaching people to reconnect to themselves, but also to not change everything on their plate immediately. We consciously know small steps kind of lead to big changes over time, but when it comes to our weight, especially this time of year where we're being bombarded with before and after pictures, that message, or we might see someone who's been doing really well. The weight loss injections are a big one at the moment. There's so much out there. Diet culture is a massive money making machine, and it's built on making us feel guilty. And it's really hard to not get sucked into all of that stuff. So I just want to give people an alternative. So many people I talk to, they know that another diet isn't the answer for them, but they don't know what is. And this is the thing, isn't it? And what I say to them is, I know that feels really unsettling, but it's like you're at a crossroads. You're stood here, and that's the familiar road. The road off to the right is the familiar road, and we know how the brain works. It loves familiarity. But as you stand here, you know that that is not the answer long term. And then there's this road off to the left that I'm offering people, but they don't know what that's like. So it's kind of, they're at that point. It's like when we talk about nervous system, they're in a freeze state. They don't want to keep repeating the same old cycles, but they don't really know what's ahead of them. And that can feel really scary. And I know for me, that's why I always have conversations with people before starting them, because a lot of people come to me very disillusioned. They have lost hope that things can be different. And my job is to just kind of talk to them in a slightly different way. Because sometimes when we do that and we feel properly seen and heard, that starts to build trust. And when we trust someone, that hope starts to come in. So that's what I mean by there's a bit of work that needs to be done before we embark on the same old, same old. So I'm
That's
conscious
it.
of a lot there.
It was a lot, but I was determined to let you get that out because I think there's a lot of stuff that you've shared there. And I think there's going to be a lot of people, me included, that can resonate with a lot of the stuff you've just said. And I think, something that really you pulled out of that personally is I think and this isn't just with weight, this is with lots of things in life and in business as well. I think we quite often do the sticky plaster thing, don't we? And I think with our weight, the best way to fix the problem is to lose some weight, isn't it? Because then everything's going to you're going to feel happy again, you're going to feel better again. And I think, as you say, I love the idea of the timeline thing. That's something I've never done and something that I would love to go back and explore because I think you're right, aren't you? When you put it into context of if something happens and you have something go on in your life that knocks the boat a little, and that happens to us all of the time, doesn't it? I think most people will be able to say, I probably eat a bit more when I'm feeling stressed, or I probably have a bit more alcohol when I'm feeling stressed, or I stop doing the walking when I'm feeling stressed. So I think there's lots of things that we actually just do because coming back to what you said as a child, it makes us feel better in ourselves. That sugar rush, that and I know I've done this over the time. Probably with me, it's more wine than food, but I think we've all got something, haven't we, that we turn to when we're feeling stressed rather than actually getting to the root problem. Why are you feeling like that in the first place?
Yeah, and even that, our brains are designed to avoid pain and seek pleasure. Okay, so we also have to take that. When I sort of start talking about our food relationship, it's influenced by multiple things. One is our past experiences like childhood, like our relationships, all of that stuff. The present, how we're living our lives today. And just looking at our lives, we are incredibly busy. Before we came on to this podcast, we were talking about how there is an invitation to be on all of the time with the online space. When we worked like corporate work or whatever before the internet went completely mad after lockdown and everyone was online, we had clearer boundaries around our working hours. And so modern life just plays a huge part in our time to be able to do pleasurable things that aren't instant gratification. So if we have a stressful, busy life, whether that's because we're time stretched or whether we've got challenges with our children or our relationships or just life, we are constantly looking for ways to make ourselves feel better. And it's not just food. We are creating a very instant gratification culture, and there's no judgment there. It's just what it is. There's pros and cons all the time to everything, isn't there? But this is something I see a lot of the time. Food is so instant gratification. You've got all your food apps. It's so easy. So we've got less time. So food is something that takes up preparing food, planning food. God, I can remember. I use something called Simply Cook. It's not, you don't get the food, you get the flavorings. So I just buy the food. It's simplified my cooking so much. I got to the point where I absolutely drove me mad. It wasn't so much the cooking it was the planning it, the shopping and going and getting it. So again, that represents pain, doesn't it? So it's understanding that those things, we live a busy lifestyle, and so that makes us time poor. And so trying to do all of these things, especially when you're a mum and all of that stuff, it becomes quite traumatic. And so there's no wonder we're going for the instant gratification. The future plays a part, worry about the future, and underpinning all of that is diet culture. So there's a lot that influences our relationship with food. And something I've been talking about a lot lately, because obviously we're in January and everyone's on the healthy eating train, but something to think about. Most of us that have been prolific dieters, the term unhealthy healthy eating is associated with weight loss, right? And
Yep.
so for most of us, if we could like download our subconscious, everything that we have that's related to weight loss, there'll be some positive in there, but a lot of it will be quite negative stuff, deprivation, isolation, failure, people not understanding where we're at. So when you start to look at healthy eating for most dieters actually represents pain. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely.
Conversely, all the foods that we cut out equal pleasure. So again, when we start to look at avoiding pain, seeking pleasure, the conscious mind will go, oh yeah, it's January, let's get on the healthy eating train. And then we wonder why it only lasts a couple of days or a couple of weeks because the subconscious is in there going, all right, here we go, it's January. We know this normally goes on for about 3 weeks. Then it hits a point, go, right, we need to have a glass of wine now. We need to unravel everything. Because that's the program, literally, the subconscious just literally keeps repeating cycles. And because what we do in January is we cut everything out, honestly, I'm my eyelids are getting the most exercise. My eye rolling's getting the most exercise at the minute. And I get it. Even the weight loss injections, been talking quite a lot about them. That would have been me 15 years ago. I would have overlooked any side effect. When your weight is entangled with your worth, you literally will do anything to lose weight. I work with quite a lot of bariatric surgery, people who've had bariatric surgery, pre and post. And again, they have this hope that it's going to be the final time. But actually, even that, when you've had your half your stomach removed, they're still gaining weight. And so beyond the scales, there is going to be a bariatric one as well. But obviously, I don't know when that's going to come. But I really, I'm fascinated by that as well. But I will work that in a different group because they're at a different headspace. So
Yeah.
yeah, there's so much that influences Emma, and you're right. I sit with a lot of women, and nearly every woman I speak to is touched by diet culture in some way, has been, whether they've had eating disorders when they're younger, disordered eating, just because someone's slim. And this is the thing, we look at someone who's slim and we think they've got it all sorted. But when I've been at my slimmest, my disordered eating has often been at its highest. The way
Mhm.
I'm managing that is not healthy.
No, no, and it's interesting, isn't it? And I know I've got things I can say about my own personal journey with my weight doing exactly the same. But what would you say is the thing that I know that my weight can determine, probably not so much now, I'm getting a bit better at that, but can determine where I am in my life, in terms of my mental health and everything else. My weight, it can go either way because I can do the I'll stop eating completely thing and lose lots of weight, or I can do the I'll comfort eat. I tend to find that there's a comfort eating followed by, or historically, not now so much, but historically followed by the opposite. Like, that's it, I'm going to starve myself now because I've comfort eat for too long. I need to sort myself out. And I think lots of people will have similar things, patterns that they have, not necessarily now, but at some point in their life, patterns that they have followed. How do you think that impacts on people from I'm putting a business slant on here because a lot of our listeners will be business owners, but on people's ability to grow their business?
Well, the first thing that jumps to mind is living in that like swinging pendulum creates a lot of stress on the nervous system. So we're often living in fight or flight or a freeze space when it comes to our weight. I think a big thing there as well is because it's such an emotive topic, you know, people hide from what's really going on. That was me. I was the happy fat woman girl. Yeah, inside I was dying, I had all of this like darkness inside of me about how I felt about my weight, but no one would have seen that, not even people that were really close to me. So we're masking all of the time. So that has a big impact. So having an overloaded nervous system, and the thing is, we get used to that chaos. I call it chaos in the comfort zone. We learn to live in this like constant battle in our heads about how we look and how we feel about how we look. And it's so familiar to us, we don't understand the impact. So, part of the first thing I do is about regulating the nervous system, which is really important before we even start looking at food. So, the biggest one is visibility. It's like, and also what we do is the judgments we place upon ourselves, we project out onto what we think other people think and feel about us. So if we are struggling with our own self-worth, we are going to project that people will see that, or we will run our businesses from our ego self. And that's what I did. So I left my corporate career that I burnt out twice in. I My ego needed to be constantly getting promoted. I needed the house, the car, the money, the job title. I'd be the one that turned up at parties with bottles of champagne because it meant that people perceived me in a certain way. And that never changed. I had this belief that I'd leave my corporate career so as I didn't burn out again. Oh my God, it was amplified. Whoever thinks running your own business is like, it's going to give you freedom, not at the start anyway. So I just followed the same programs. So for a lot of people who struggle with their weight, they're living out of their ego. And for some people, the ego presents in this like overworking. So that opens us up to burning out. And for some people, the ego is the shy, like hiding away, doesn't want to be seen. So dependent, just because someone's doing really well in their business doesn't mean that they're aligned to what's going on. And so this is more common. And this is why these conversations are so important. And this is why I want to create these spaces. Beyond the Scales is not just about education and teaching people. It's about creating a space where they can actually start to look at where are they living either in the ego that is working too hard. Because when we work hard, I know this has definitely been out your you've had this in your life. When we're working hard over here, there's no judgment because there's a reason for that. Things fall away. Our relationships at home, the time we spend with our children, certainly our relationships to ourselves. So what you've then got is you're creating a bigger problem. And then when these relationships aren't great, we don't have the skills to be able to deal with them. So we focus on, remember, pain and pleasure. This becomes pain, something we don't know how to deal with. So we focus even more on work. So we get caught up in these really unhealthy cycles of overworking. Add in social media where you can be online 24/7 if you like, it becomes really complex. So I think in answer to your question, there's a few things there. It absolutely can stop us. I work with so many beautiful people that have got so much talent, but they haven't got the confidence to put themselves out there. So visibility, absolutely one of them. The other one is the opposite, where someone's doing really well in their business, but it's very much behind the closed doors, if you like. There's not a lot of self-care going on. They feel very disconnected from their families. So it can affect us in multiple ways. For me, it was the confidence thing, either, visibility, I think, has been on my top of my agenda for the last few years. And I am slowly like starting to put myself out there more, the thought of public speaking. And I've done a few little events and things like that. It's terrifying for a lot of people. And what makes it even harder is you've got so many people saying that's what you've got to do to grow your business. So I think a big thing as well is we don't trust ourselves. People who carry weight, they're very disconnected. They don't trust themselves. So we're seeking validation and answers outside of ourselves all of the time. So we're tending to, again, this makes us not aligned to what's right for us. I have over the last 5 years invested in lots of different coaches and people, and I've got stuff from all of it. But ultimately, I've overridden what felt intuitively right for me. And beyond the scales is so much more than just what I'm bringing for people. It's what it means for me. It really feels terrifying, but really aligned. And I love that I've got these people supporting me and want to support me in my vision and my mission. And it feels it the only way I can describe it, when you're breathing and it just feels really right and natural. That's how it feels. But so many people, especially when they've got self-worth and weight and body image stuff going on, it makes life really complicated because then we mask it as well. We pretend it's not a problem. And that's another layer of like,
Absolutely, absolutely. And I think we also overcompensate, don't we? And this touches on what you were just saying about if something isn't happy over here, you'll work harder or you'll I think that another thing is that I had a client and she came across as such a confident person. She was unhappy with her weight, but she came across as such an outwardly confident person, and everybody used to constantly be telling her how confident they were that she was, that they wished she had her confidence. And she actually had a fear that if she lost her weight, she would no longer be confident because she was overcompensating for the fact that she didn't feel comfortable in her body in terms of how she showed up. So she showed up as, in her words, this larger than life character, but it was all an act, all a mask, and all a face. And I think that's, whether that's weight or something else, I think we do that, don't we? We overcompensate with things to try and make ourselves feel better.
absolutely. And straight away, I think, oh, I wonder what she had said to her as a little girl. You can almost imagine it, that she was maybe loved to sing and dance. And like, that was really embraced in her because this is what happens. We all have a role that we were given in childhood, and it's like we fulfill that. Because we learn that we get attention for that. It's really interesting. In my group this morning, I just asked them that question, who are you without your weight? Weight and our eating relationship is a huge part of our identity. In fact, that's the first thing we're going to work on in the new program. Identity. Who am I? What is my weight identity? What is my food identity? There's something called secondary gains. It's like, and when I ask people what are the benefits of you carrying the extra weight, they all look at me as if to say, there's no benefit. Well, there is. My benefit of being 19 stone was men didn't find me attractive. So therefore I didn't have to have a relationship. Therefore I didn't have to navigate the fact that I didn't trust people. So there are always reasons why we are holding on to weight, and it has got nothing to do with laziness, greed, or real willpower. Um, it's complex. Our food relationship is complex, and we really oversimplify it by thinking that just looking at what we're eating and how much we're moving. That is part of it, absolutely. But even that, it needs to be done in the right way. Because as I said earlier, healthy eating for most of us equals pain, deprivation, isolation. How many mums, when they go on a diet, cook different food? I remember working with this lady, right? She was a binge eater. I laughed because there were so many stories that she told me. And as we started to navigate it, she could totally see how she was setting herself up for binging. So she'd go into Tesco's and she'd stand in front of the sandwiches to navigate which sandwich. She really wanted the egg and bacon sandwich, but she wouldn't have that. She'd have the Weight Watchers cress, egg and cress. And then she'd eat that, and it didn't really satisfy. All she could think about was the egg and bacon sandwich. And she'd go home and eat 2 packs of biscuits. And every Friday night her family would have fish and chips, and she'd sit there with her salad, and then she'd go in the kitchen and eat secretly. This is what we do. We're creating, like, the conscious mind is going, oh yeah, sit there with your chicken salad while everyone else is eating something nice. So when you look at it from an inner child perspective, it's like sending a 6-year-old to a party where there's cakes and jellies and telling her she can't have it. It's not going to be long before the outer child is like the teenage self that's going like that. It's going to
Exactly.
go, on this. And this is what we're replicating all of the time. So there is a different way.
There
That's all I'm going to
absolutely
say.
is.
There
There
is. Yeah,
absolutely is. And I could literally sit here and listen to
I
you
know.
all day, Hayley. I really, really could. But we are running out of time.
Brilliant.
So at the end of every episode, I ask my guests to share with us a top tip. So what would you like to share with our listeners?
For anybody, I think for anybody who struggles with their weight, before you even think about changing anything from like a diet or exercise perspective, look at nervous system regulation. For most people, they live, especially business owners, we live in fight or flight. And when we've got a lot of cortisol going through our bodies, that makes it really hard to lose weight. It also means we can't think straight. So we're often looking for instant gratification. We're making quick, rash decisions, especially around food and eating. So focus on regulating the nervous system. And there's really simple techniques, breath work, mindfulness, taking moments to pause, really easy. We kind of overlook the easy stuff, the going back to basics, but they work. So my top tip for anybody, and this is where I come from, I work on settling the nervous system because a lot of people are overthinkers and I have anxiety. Again, anxiety is about, we have like this constant alarm going off in our bodies. Our bodies are really intuitive and they tell us that something's not right, but we override them and we go into solution mode. We've been taught to think and not feel, and so that just creates more anxiety. The more we're thinking and trying to, we go to what worst case scenario a lot of the time, don't we? And the brain doesn't know that actually that thing's not going to happen. So we create so much unnecessary stress. And if you're somebody who's an emotional eater, so calming the nervous system down so we're not in these perpetual stress creating loops, it's really powerful. That's my top tip.
Fabulous. And then finally, where can our listeners come and find you to see what you're up to and to obviously keep an eye out for Beyond the Scales?
So I'm all over socials as my name, Hayley Perkins. I've got a free community, support community called If Diets Don't Work. My website is If Diets Don't Work. And there's everything you can find out about me on there. But there is also on there an assessment form. So if you're somebody who just wants to start delving into your own relationship with food a bit more, fill out the assessment form, and that will come through to me, and then we'll start a conversation about, and I'll be able to give you probably some really quick pointers that are going to be really helpful.
Fabulous. And Hayley, if you share that link with me, I'll make sure it goes in the show notes so everybody can get access to that assessment form. So thank you so much for joining me today and sharing so much information. I'm sure it's going to help lots and lots of people. And thank you to everybody else for listening. I will see you next time.